Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay,
Let's
so
do
you
it
want
real
me,
quick. Yeah.
you want me to do it like we did with
Okay,
Kaylee?
all set.
Wait, can
All
we
right,
wait
thank
1
you.
second?
We just
So
have 1 second.
We realized we didn't come out of our exec when we jumped in cars to come here, so,
Okay, do you wanna do that
Yeah, do you
officially on record now?
yeah, do we just wanna say, where's, okay, so we'll do it the same way
Yeah,
as before,
just do
so
it, yeah.
can I have a motion to come out of exec to join our work session with the town board?
You're all set.
Second.
All in favor?
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Alright, well now, welcome.
Thanks,
Welcome everybody, it is August 9th and we are, the town board and the Chappaqua Central School District Board are having a joint meeting. So for those on the town board, can I have a motion to open the meeting?
I open the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do you wanna do that as well?
You don't need to.
You don't need to?
No.
Okay. So I thought it would be helpful to go around and I don't know if everyone knows each other and just say hello, including our members of the audience here today. So we can all just introduce ourselves. Do you wanna start, Christine?
Yeah, I'm Christine Ackerman. I'm the superintendent in Chappaqua. Does it make sense for, we have a lot of our staff here. You want us to?
Yeah, I thought we'll just go around in a circle. Jane?
Which way, so hi, I'm Jane Shepherdson, I'm a board member of CCSD.
I'm Vicki Tip, I'm a town board member and deputy supervisor.
I'm Lisa Katz, the town supervisor.
Kaylee Long, board member, school board.
Hi, I'm Chris Hildenbrand. I'm a town board member.
I'm Margot May, I'm the attorney for the Chappaqua School District.
Warren Messner, board member, and I would say, I think you, Lisa, Vicki and I were together the last time we had one of these joint meetings, that was a long time ago.
So it was
And
a
it
long
worked
time
well, so
ago.
we should try and do this more often.
We should.
Hi, Ryan Kelsey. I'm the newest school board member.
Hillary Grasso, also a school board member.
Lisa Elsner, I'm the district clerk for the school district.
Dorothy Kanyuk, I'm with the Film All Horizon.
Joe Gramado, Director of Facilities for the school.
Andrew Lennon, Assistant Superintendent for Business for the school district.
Jamie Block, Director of Athletics, Physical Education and Health.
Hi, Andrew Persilio, Principal of High School. Ed Phillips, Gene and Bean, Town and Turf.
Jill Shapiro, town administrator, town of Newcastle.
Christina Papes, Town Clerk and Tax Receiver.
Mark Wilbur, the examiner.
You need
Well, thank you. I want to thank everybody before we get into the meat of the meeting. I want to thank everyone for coming, for the school board joining us today here in Town Hall. To Warren's point, I think it's so important we are one town, that we work together as the two largest governing bodies in town to make sure that, Newcastle's the best it can be. So once or twice a year at least, I think we should be meeting just to go over any issues, make sure that we are working together well, and see if there are even ways we can help each other out with shared services, things like that as well. So one of the things we wanted to talk to the school board tonight, and you might have seen in my recent supervisor's report, is we have a very exciting proposal that we've been looking at for quite a long time called the ChapLine, which many of you may have heard about. What that is about a mile and a half path that can connect basically downtown Chappaqua Hamlet and Bell with the Chappaqua Crossing Business District and Horace Greeley High School. It is a way that we can get hundreds and hundreds of residents as a way that people can walk and connect those two businesses, as well as kids can now walk to school that way if it were to come to pass. It would be there were a lot of iterations of this. It would be, the current proposal would be partly paved. I don't believe we need to take anyone's property anymore. We're gonna have a presentation on this in a few moments, but it does go behind the school, so we wanted to get your input on this. We actually think it would be fabulous. It would also be a way I see the cross-country team running all the time on 117 and places where frankly they shouldn't be running. This would be a great way for sports teams also to have a place, a paved path where they can really run and commute to and from school. So with that being said, unless there are any questions off the bat, I'd like to kind of turn it over
Actually, Lisa, I'm gonna start and
yeah.
then turn it over to Lee.
Perfect.
Okay? Hi, everybody, and welcome to the school board, welcome to everybody coming. Get my glasses. I'm just gonna go back a little bit and just set the stage for how it is that we ended up at this point. So in 2013, when Lisa Katz was first elected to the town board and with then Supervisor Rob Greenstein, they were approached by a resident who was promoting the idea of a ChapLine. The resident, Dan Google, presented his idea of formalizing the well-worn path behind Horace Greeley High School that ran along the Westchester County trunk line. And it was being proposed as an alternative access connecting the high school, Chappaqua Crossing, and the neighborhoods around Lawrence Farms to the Chappaqua Hamlet. The idea of a multimodal pathway perfectly dovetailed with the work being done by our planning board, our town planner, and others on Chappaqua Crossing, which highlighted the need to implement traditional neighborhood design principles and the importance of connecting Chappaqua Crossing to the surrounding community. The ChapLine is expected to connect approximately 400 households to the Chappaqua Hamlet when it's actually built. At the heart of this proposal is the understanding that residents want a safe way to walk to and from their neighborhoods to the Chappaqua Hamlet. Residents are understandably concerned at the sight of the cross-country team running with commercial traffic along 117, a New York State truck route with a minimal shoulder area. The town has explored building a traditional sidewalk along 117. Due to environmental sensitivities, which include wetlands and watercourses, topography, to name just three, and most importantly, the New York State DOT's intractable requirements of taking as opposed to easements, a minimum of 10 feet from private property owners along the route. That's comprised of a 5-foot snow shelf and a 5-foot sidewalk, and retaining walls not being sited on state property. The sidewalk project was simply not feasible. Some village homes along the route would end up with truck traffic literally traversing their front lawns. In early 2016, the town board created a ChapLine committee with representatives from those areas most affected, including Chestnut Oaks and Lawrence Farms, to make sure that the project was planned in a collaborative way which respects the rights of the neighbors. The committee helped draft the RFP for the feasibility study, and in 2018, Barton and LaJudas was selected as the consultant to assist us in creating the ChapLine feasibility study. And in 2019, Barton and LaJudas, actually Lee Jones, who I'll introduce to you in a moment, along with the ChapLine committee, presented the initial proposal to the town board. Over the next 2 years, the proposal was further refined to address the feedback received and then presented to the board of directors of Chestnut Oaks and the Lawrence Farms Homeowners Association. It should be noted that this is actually not the first presentation of the ChapLine to the school board. In 2013, members of the then town board, along with members of the then school board with Superintendent McKay, walked the path together. The initial reaction to the proposal from this group was very positive, as was the reaction from Roaring Brook Road residents and other neighbors. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lee Jones from Barton and LaJudas. She's been our gifted consultant who has guided us up until this point. She spearheaded the feasibility study and has been assisting us in our grant efforts to secure funding for the project. Lee, actually, does everybody know the members of the town staff that are on screen?
I don't.
Guys, yeah, okay, so we start in the upper left-hand corner with Lee Jones. She's our consultant from Barton and LaJudas. Next to Lee is Bob Cioli, he is our town engineer. Lauren Cascone is our deputy town clerk. Police Chief Carroll is below Lee Jones, and Tiffany White is my assistant. If I've forgotten anybody, can't see who the other two names are.
It says Carrie
Oh,
Krams,
okay.
who is
Okay.
running our
Lee, I'm
video.
gonna turn it over to you.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Lee Jones, as Jill just said. I'm a landscape architect with Barton and LaJudas, a consultant hired by the town to create a feasibility study to look at the ChapLine Trailway that was just discussed and presented by Lisa and Jill. I'm going to share my screen and sort of walk you through our process and the final layout that we currently have for the proposed layout that we have for the trail. Can you see my presentation?
We can.
Okay. So up on my agenda tonight, I'm just gonna introduce you to the project team, look at the project schedule, how we got here today, the background and objectives of the feasibility study, look at some of the existing conditions along the proposed route, our design process and considerations, the final preferred trailway route, design criteria for the shared use path, probable construction costs, project funding, and then we can open it up to discussions. As Jill has mentioned, obviously we work closely with the town staff throughout and the ChapLine committee. On my end, again, we're a multidisciplinary firm. I'm a landscape architect. On my project team, we're civil engineers, traffic engineers, environmental engineers, environmental scientists, wetland scientists. Again, we're a large group, pulling together this report to make sure we looked at all the different impacts and different variations and while we were studying the different routes. And as was mentioned, also the key stakeholders along the route are the private property owners within Chestnut Oaks and the Lawrence Farms community, the Horace Greeley High School, as well as Metro North. This, again, we began our project in July 2019. And, again, beginning with a lot of our project team site visits, environmental studies, doing wetland delineations. And we began then also talking with key focus groups. We met with Metro North. We met with the ChapLine committee and the town, throughout. We also started looking at different focus groups, including Chestnut Oaks and Lawrence Farms. We met with each of those individual communities at different times, Chestnut Oaks in July of 2020 and Lawrence Farms in September of 2020, as well as again in December of 2021. With all of this, we were able to, we really looked at sort of two different routes following the Westchester County trunk line, and then as well as trying to keep all of them town property. So we have two different conceptual layouts that we sort of walked all these different key focus groups through to come up with our final route. And then our final feasibility study report was delivered to the town in December of 2020, and we presented it to the town board that following spring. And since then, we've been trying to, submitting grant applications to try to get this project funded. So a little bit about the overall project. I know you're all familiar with the area, and as Lisa mentioned, it's a 1.5 mile plus or minus trail. The majority of it is off-road, connecting downtown Chappaqua up to Chappaqua Crossing. Also connects Horace Greeley High School with the Robert E. Bell Middle School in downtown. And on-road portions, shared use road usage and sidewalks from the end of North Greeley at Chestnut Oaks down to the Metro North train station. The whole route runs parallel to the Sawmill River Parkway as well as the Metro North Railroad tracks. And again, the Sawmill River trunk sewer line, the county sewer line, exists in this portion, sort of was the impetus of why this route was chosen, because this area was cleared of trees and brush to install the sewer line. So it's sort of this natural path that already exists in this area. As I mentioned, and as you can see on the map, it's adjacent to Chestnut Oaks and the Lawrence Farm communities, as well as Horace Greeley High School. And our goal throughout all of this was to avoid, minimize, or mitigate wetland impacts to the greatest extent possible, and to use the town-owned properties wherever possible as well. And our key, in terms of the design, was on the comfort, safety, and convenience for the residents and users of this trailway, and to avoid any conflicts with adjacent land uses to the greatest extent possible, which is again why we included all the adjacent property, communities within our discussions throughout. Just another couple of maps sort of showing the layout, the location, sort of where this route is within the community of Newcastle, within Chappaqua. These are some existing condition photos. This is the southern end of it. at the Chestnut Oaks community at the northern end of North Greeley Ave. And as you can see in the upper right-hand picture, that there already is a pathway that sort of exists behind this 12-foot high solid wood fence at Chestnut Oaks that they installed to sort of separate them from the Metro North Railroad. And you can see this is the closest we ever get to the railroads. The trail always stays within 50 feet of the train tracks, which is a requirement of Metro North. And again, we have had discussions with Metro North, and they're in support of the project. There's paperwork and actual a process that will need to happen in order to develop this trail in this area. But again, they've been a part of the conversation too. And when funding gets established is when that process will truly begin. This is now heading north. We hit the area where it's mostly wetlands now. And while the trunk sewer line itself goes through this wetland area, we have town property adjacent to the wetlands that we're able to keep our trail on, that we're able to avoid these wetlands to the greatest extent possible. After the wetlands, still heading further north is when we get where it's that cleared path I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where the county's the sewer line is within this mowed lawn area. And you can see here, these are some of the residences in winter of Lawrence Farms. You can obviously see up into the properties of these in the winter time, but not in the summertime, as you can see in the upper photos. And at the end, the northern end, before we hit Roaring Brook Road, the sewer line is exposed over the gorge, which is right adjacent to the school. And then we hit Roaring Brook Road up to the intersection with the entrance to Chappaqua Crossing and Horace Greeley High School. So again, to get us to our preferred trail route, our design team made multiple site visits. We walked the whole corridor. We worked closely with the town staff throughout and had many presentations and discussions with individual property owners, with community groups, and again, key stakeholders in Metro North. We did a full environmental assessment looking at opportunities and constraints, which guided where the final route would be. And again, we started to design alternatives completely through probable construction costs to really look at what things would cost and what the benefits and the restrictions are on either one. And again, looking at, like I said, cost considerations and then just the overall design criteria for the shared use path. So this is the current final route. Again, we're starting at the southern portion. This is within Chestnut Oaks. Both of the top is at the southern end, where we have a trailhead with some signage and all of that. And working with the Chestnut Oaks community, they did not, they wanted this separated from their community. While the town does have an easement through their property, which would allow them to have a bike lane or a shared use path, within the Chestnut Oaks community, with the town, you're doing the greatest extent possible to work within the community and what the community wants. Routed this along Metro North property, again, to avoid it being within the existing community of Chestnut Oaks. So this again follows more or less that line behind that existing wood screening fence and up past their tennis courts, which are in the northern part of the community. This is just a rendering, this is existing conditions, and this is the proposed conditions. Again, their existing wall or an improved version of it. And a Metro North requirement is a chain link fence separating the trail from the train tracks. While it's a Metro North requirement, it's also something the town would like as well. And this is an actual section showing the topography change from the existing railroad tracks up to where the proposed shared use path would be. Again, with the screening fence to separate it from the Chestnut Oaks community. This is now going through the wetland area. All this area with the little black dots is where the flag delineated wetland that our environmental scientists located in the field. These two black lines are where the existing county sewer line runs. So again, to avoid environmental impacts to the greatest extent possible, we pulled the trail out of the wetland area as opposed to following the trunk line, but still maintaining it within town property. This area in here is the Lawrence Farms community. And these sections over here again are just sort of showing some typical what the shared use path would look like. And while we are avoiding the wetlands to the greatest extent possible, to avoid private properties, and just because of the wetland, boundaries, there are areas where we are going to need to traverse a wetland, which is where we're proposing boardwalks so that they can be raised, the wetlands can still act as they do, we don't impact the wildlife, and the installation of these boardwalks would be minimal impact in terms of their foundations and stuff. There's a couple of choices of pin foundations or helical piles, which do not require extensive excavation, allowing the wetland to be minimally impacted. And again, the wildlife can still traverse through. And then as you can see on the lower one, our goal was to stay out of the private properties, which prevented us from following the trunk line in this area, which is again why we're outside of that, just as downtown property. This is just a typical plan view of one of the private residences. Again, this is the trunk line, so this is one of our looking at the two different routes. This is looking at one of the routes of following the trunk line, which would be much easier construction because it's already cleared, the trail would be at grade. But again, to avoid the private property, the current proposed route is looking at, going around it on a boardwalk. And so again, each of these private property owners were met with and discussed in order for us to follow the trunk line. The different opportunities would be for the town to acquire land, create an easement, possibly do a land swap, or again, avoid the private properties, which is what we are currently doing with the current trail route. And this is just a section again, and this is to scale, so you can see sort of separation from where the existing house is, the existing roadway, and just the topography. The proposed trail route, this is the trunk line here, and then to avoid the private properties, the boardwalk is even this much further away. And this is where the Metro North trails are in relation to that. And then we have the northernmost portion where we are adjacent to Horace Greeley High School. And as again, the double black lines are where the existing trunk line, that cleared trail is currently, which I know you're all familiar with. And to avoid school property, we're staying on town property, which this requires more clearing of trees and more earthwork, but it is still a feasible option. Just increased construction costs, as opposed to building it on grade. And then this brown segment is where it crosses the gorge. And then we are proposing a northern trailhead with parking spaces, about 20 parking spaces here, and then following Roaring Brook Road. Up on the southern side of it is the town has a large right of way here. So this is again all within town property, bringing us to the intersection. This is just a rendering here again of this is existing conditions of the proposed trunk sewer line as crossing the gorge. And this is where a pedestrian bridge is proposed to cross that gorge to connect the shared use path to Roaring Brook Road. And this bridge would be a pedestrian bridge, but be able to accommodate emergency vehicles and/or maintenance vehicles. And again, all of this, as I mentioned, the southern portion of Roaring Brook Road is town right of way, and so we're proposing the trail runs alongside the road itself. The proposed trail is all accessible and is less than 5% slope, except for the area on Roaring Brook Road where it's still able to be accessible as long as you're following the pitch of the road, which is our only opportunity here. But it is why we switch back it in this way to keep it at 5% until we follow the road up. And just in terms of parking, looking at parking on either end, again, there are 20 spots at the northern end, and at the southern end, there's on-street parking, which is public now. There's approximately 33 spaces there, and along North Greeley Ave, 13 spaces along North Greeley Ave, and another 20 along Bischoff Ave, which is right here where the southern end is. This is just our basic design criteria for the shared use path. And just some things to note is we're proposing a 10-foot wide trail, which allows for both bike travel and pedestrian walking, strollers, wheelchairs. And again, as you mentioned, the slope of it, while it's 4.5% for the majority of it, along Roaringbrook Road is a little bit steeper to follow the road width. And again, as I mentioned, the bridge would allow vehicular traffic for emergency and snow removal as well. We looked at both, multiple materials for it, whether it be asphalt or gravel trail surface. Currently, the town's looking and leaning towards asphalt in terms of maintenance and just use and ease of use. And that's what our current trail design is based on, an asphalt trail. And then within the wetlands, as I mentioned, it would be boardwalks. And those, again, there's opportunities there to add interpretive signage and or overlooks to really embrace that area that is very beautiful and adjacent to the town's bird sanctuary, which is in that area as well. The town's looking to develop further as part of this project. A key thing is also just sort of the maintenance of this, and again, we've worked, Chief Carroll is on this call, and this would be monitored. We work with them in terms of looking at where to provide cameras and lighting as well. We are treating this as a commuter trail. Then it would, obviously with winter months, and it being dark out, it would be lighted. Lights are able to be angled and shielded that they wouldn't impact the adjacent private residences, but will provide lighting and visibility for the users when it gets dark. There's also been a discussion of cameras and surveillance, and again, looking at the existing vegetation and the proposed vegetation, that we provide the greatest amount of visibility as possible to limit any hiding places. And then the key is, a well-maintained trail, and the town plans on having this be considered a lineal park, and it will be maintained by the town and the Parks and Rec Department. Again, as I mentioned, lighting, the top are some existing lightings throughout town, some pedestrian post lighting in downtown on Main Street, and existing pedestrian bollards on some other shared use paths that are within the town. So we could, follow existing lighting or look at, new lighting for the ChapLine itself. As I mentioned, signs will be key, both directional and warning signage, how to use the trails, rules and regulations, interpretive signage within the wetland area, and then having some gateway treatments at the trailheads, the northern and southern ends, so people understand the length of the trail, and then even trail markings along it so they know how far it is to downtown, or to the school, or to Chappaqua Crossing. This is our probable construction costs. We pulled these together in 2020, looking at about $10 million for the overall project. And we have inflation included, and now with construction costs and material delays and all that, there might even be increased inflation, but regardless, we're working with the town to try to get funding for this. And in some of the funding we've gone after already in 2021, we applied for the Climate Smart Communities Grant, and the town was awarded $500,000. And we're looking, working with the town to determine how to spend that. We were hoping to also get a New York State DOT TAP grant to assist with this. We were not awarded that, but that application was pulled together. And so we have these applications that are already pulled together in the town. We're continuously reviewing new funding opportunities as well as ones that come out every year, every other year, and looking at other ways for the town to continue to try to find monies to get ChapLine funded. And that is all I have. Again, we can go back to any slide if needed. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so I guess I can see you better. And then if again I can share anything again, we can go over anything in more detail.
So another few benefits of this trail, which were hinted at, is that it will connect many neighborhoods to our Metro North train station as well. So it's a way to help, as part of a climate smart community to hopefully minimize traffic and car usage down to the train station and allow significant number of residents to be able to walk and utilize that. In addition, this trail is being used right now. Not officially, but if you walk it, you will see many kids on this trail, especially during the school year. So this is a way that will really formalize the trail and I think actually increase safety for people who are utilizing that trail. And it also connects two of our largest affordable housing developments in town, both at Chappaqua Crossing and also the Conifer Hunts Lane development. So it does also increase the walkability between those two developments as well. So there are a lot of, I think, benefits to this proposal, but certainly we want to open it up to any questions you may have, concerns, etc.
I have two questions. The first is really simple, which is the fencing that she outlined on the Metro North side, that would be the full continuation of the trail, like?
Yes, it
Okay.
would, as long as it's contiguous with the Metro North, there will be fencing there.
And then the part that I'm not clear about, she mentioned both trailheads. And then you and she are also talking about like commuters using this from the adjoining neighborhoods. Are there multiple points of entry to the trail, or is it just at the trailheads? Because I'm kind of missing how people would use it to commute if there aren't sort of middle points of entry to get onto the trail.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but right now there are two main entrances. It's possible that private residences may wish to have their own entrance into it and Horace Greeley High School may also want to have their own entrance onto the trailhead. But right now, we are not proposing that, we're just proposing the two.
So it's really only people commuting who live right off, like, it's not really then a commuting option for the people who are halfway down. Like in Lawrence Farm South, you're not gonna walk up to Roaring Brook Road to then walk back down on the trail. I guess that's what I'm missing, is like, a lot of what you're proposing with this seems to make a lot of sense in terms of using it to commute, but if there aren't access points, then it's not really usable to commute, and if there are access points, then that changes sort of how we look at it in terms of access.
Well, if I may, so right now there are in fact the two. So you're talking about access to the 91 townhomes that will be built at Chappaqua Crossing, the affordables, market rate, and workforce housing that's currently at Chappaqua Crossing, and also the Lawrence Farms area community, which is pretty
But
significant.
how do they have
How do they
access? That's what I'm
access?
missing.
I have a
I'm
question
sorry,
about
so there's a sidewalk. There's, when Lee talks about
Lawrence Farms East
east,
versus south.
I'm sorry, so the
As well.
Annandale area.
Okay.
Kitchell, that area back there around Kittle Road, all of those homes back there can access this through the sidewalk. As there will be a sidewalk that extends, you pick it up at Chappaqua Crossing, you come across the street at the light, and there will be a sidewalk on the high school. I'm really bad with directions, so forgive me for not using them. Everybody who knows me knows this. So along the high school side of the street down to the trailhead would be a sidewalk and accessible. There are opportunities in the future if communities want, like the other Lawrence Farms, to access this and open it up. We're not proposing it right now. The other thing to remember is because it is an off-road path, it's not like you're gonna be able to hop right on. The path goes through a wetland, so it's
Right,
not
no,
like
that's
you're
what I was
gonna-
asking, because that's how it seems to me, is that it's not super accessible, but then when we're talking about using it for commuting, if it's not super accessible, it's not super.
Well, just to clarify, I think what you're suggesting is it's not super accessible to the homes that border it,
Right.
but to all the homes that are up Roaring Brook,
Right.
they have to walk down Roaring Brook, right? I mean, so there's an
Yeah.
extra piece of that. But then once they do, they can connect to the ChapLine versus walking, for example, from Annandale on 117.
Right, no, that I get.
So you have an extra maybe third of a mile to get from Lawrence Farms or the top of Roaring Brook to the ChapLine. Once you're there though, then you can walk. But yes, you're right, the homes that border it,
Actually
it's not
can't
like
really
you
get
can
it.
walk out your
Yeah.
backyard and hop on
Right.
the trail.
Well, these
There
are,
actually is
There may be
the
some,
ability
yeah, some.
for Lawrence Farms South to connect to the ChapLine, if they wish, it's a private community. If they want to have that access, we will grant them that access so that that entire neighborhood can access the path. But we don't want to demand that that happen, so if they choose to do that, it's certainly available.
And I know it was hard to see marking up when Leslie was going over that, or Lee, I'm sorry, was going over that. So the actual access point on Roaring Brook Road is exactly where compared to the entrance to the high school and Chappaqua Crossing?
So if you, go ahead.
Lee.
Well, at that intersection, we are starting it at that one on the southern side of Roaring Brook Road. And then the off-road portion starts, further down, right where there's a pull-off currently at Roaring Brook Road. Getting back
So there will be a sidewalk along Roaring Brook Road, which is kind of nice to have anyway. The continuation of the sidewalk, if you cross from Chappaqua Crossing,
Right.
and then on the high school side, but
Right.
along the street, there'll be just a sidewalk along Roaring Brook Road.
Okay.
And then if you're coming
Jane,
down the hill,
Look, she pulled it up.
but if you're coming,
Yeah.
but to think about it, if you're
Right.
coming down the hill before you get to the train tracks,
Right.
on the left, there's a big area that
Right,
cars
that's
can
the
pull out.
parking, right. So
That's
before
where
the
that
train
is.
station and the
That is where that
crossing.
is
Okay.
proposed. So it's down from the high school.
Okay.
So we met, John Chow and I and Andrew had met with Lee just to provide some context about the path behind Greeley. And some of the things that we talked about was it was important to us that there'd be a barrier, which I'm hearing, between the train tracks and the school, right? So that was like first, make sure there's a barrier there. Then it's what are people thinking about in terms of security from the path to the high school when school's in session? And then we also talked about, and I see here it very clearly looks like it's been addressed, but also you have to live in it to know if it's gonna be a problem or not for us, but just parking, because now there's a sidewalk coming up to the district office. And are people going to use the Ed Center parking lot to try to get to the
Right.
path? But there's a bank of parking spots there, so hopefully that wouldn't be happening. And that concern would only be when school's not in session, because we don't have security in the front. So those are the main areas, Andrew, that we spoke to Lee about when she came and did the site visit about 2 years ago, that we would have to continue to flesh out. But what I see in the presentation that I think, in addition to having the discussion here with our board about the trail, is that a letter of support for the project is what I see in there, would be something additionally that the town would be asking us to do as a part of the grant process. Is that correct?
It would be very helpful.
So we would have to talk about that publicly, and
at
if
one of
that's
our board
something you would
meetings.
want me to
Right.
write on the district's behalf. Some of the benefits that we discussed, of course, would be our use of that space for our teams, as well as some of our PE programs. We're just putting in a mountain bike program, so we would see ourselves down there using that space with frequency, but we just have to balance that out, some of the concerns that we had, and then decide if the district is comfortable with me submitting a letter on our behalf for their grant application process. So I just wanted to provide that
We're doing a
context.
security order right now, right? So we have to understand that goes back and see what they do. Because, Joe and I and a couple of the board members walked that in 2013 with Rob Greenstein up to our knees in mud. But our biggest concern was security and how opening that whole pathway up and how that. Pardon me?
No, I was just saying the police
Chief Carroll is on.
The other thing that we looked at when we went with Lee was how far back that path actually is from Greeley, and it's pretty far. So we just need to think about if what that should look like for us, so that if we are gonna support the project, that we feel like it's safe during the school day for us, so it doesn't become an additional area that we need to be worried about. So that would just be something we would have to talk about a little bit more. But there's a lot of benefits to us for the district if a path like this would obviously exist. But of course, we have some things that we would have to talk about as well.
And this is a different iteration, right? Like this, when it was first raised, this was well before I was on the board, with when you guys walked it. That was when it was also on
Our property.
Greeley property versus now it's not. And and by definition, that moves it further away.
Yes.
And that
from
was
the school.
And that we appreciated the town really considering that recommendation that we made collectively with that particular school board, because there's a whole process that we would have to be involved in if we were going to grant easements on our property. So that removing that as a part of the process, we can be a partner and a thought partner with the town, but the decision of whether or not that path is gonna move forward is not ours. So we appreciate not being placed in that position.
Are there, just similar to the bike path, like in Millwood and that whole trailway, like we say, there's really supposed to be an access point at the beginning and the end. So, but are there inroads for emergency vehicles and things like that in terms of having access if something happens along the trailway? Like, is that part of what's built in there? Will there be access?
Yes.
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 It's also only 1.5
5 miles.
versus the North County Trail, which is
Right.
22 miles.
Right. No, absolutely.
Right, we have built in an emergency access in the middle of it.
Okay.
Um,
Exactly.
But again, emergency only, we would need it for construction.
Right.
Right,
You know,
but
we
it wouldn't
think-
be open for general use.
It would not be.
And
Yeah, that can be a decision down the road, but right now, the answer's no.
Can I just ask Chief Carroll a question,
Sure.
which may be benefit for everybody? When you think about analogizing this to the North County Trail, do we have particular issues there with safety? I mean, it's obviously not adjacent to a school, but it's sort of a wooded path that winds, in a fairly deserted area, especially at night.
We don't at all. I'd say the only concerns we ever have is some medical cases. Heart attack, a bike fall, something like that. And again, we have access to that. But from anything else, no.
So you don't anticipate hours of use for this, right? Like it would just be perpetually open, it's not.
It would be like any of our other parks, dawn to dusk, basically.
No.
Wouldn't it be?
No, because we want it for commuters,
Oh, well,
which
that's
is why it's lit, and that's why that we would have surveillance cameras along it so the police can be.
But there's not gonna be a gate.
There's no gate that's
No, there's
closing
no
it.
gate.
Okay, that's what I'm
There's
asking.
no gate.
No, it is constructed so that the police can patrol it. We would probably need to buy another vehicle that, can accommodate it, but we expect it to be regularly patrolled. It's going to be, we have cameras throughout town now that the police desk is able to monitor, and this would just be all part of the routine patrol.
And I'd also want to confirm something with Chief Carroll, which I think would be useful. It just seems to me that this new iteration of the ChapLine would be a lot safer than conditions that are existing at this point. Since kids are using the area and people can get back there, would you say that the ChapLine would be a safer environment, seeing that there would be lighting and potential for cameras, et cetera? What would your assessment be?
Oh, definitely, much easier for us to access as well. And like Jill said, I would plan on having an alternate vehicle, we talked about lighting, we talked about call boxes. Yeah, it's definitely a safer alternative, and getting people off 117 is huge.
And what is the
And it will
support
be
level?
patrolled.
Right, of the, I do remember, I think when I first joined the board, this was discussion about the easements that would be needed in the Lawrence Farms Crossway area, but it seems like that has all, since you've gotten that off the table, do you find large degree of support from
What about Chestnut Oaks?
those neighborhoods? Like, where did you land with that? So, I mean, I know there's not an easement issue anymore, but was there still any concern voiced by those community members, even though you don't need the easement anymore?
Some people have expressed concerns about it, which is why we're very clear about our emergency access being only emergency access.
Okay.
When it's raised, well, wouldn't it be great for Lawrence Farms to have access to that as a way to commute to downtown, if that's something that
There are pro and cons to those,
Sure.
yes,
Right.
right.
And of course, we're going to collaborate, neighbors wanna make sure that there won't be significant light pollution,
Right.
et cetera. So we will work with them as to appropriate lighting, but I think we've addressed that for the most part. We're not gonna have, high lights. They're gonna be more like the lower bollards that shine down as opposed to up, that Lee showed in the pictures.
So I had put down a few questions, but I think a lot of them has been answered because they were mostly safety and security questions, because to me it's just maybe too close or maybe it's not. I can't really visualize how far it is, and just having access, just random people having access to the schools. And but also, what is the maintenance of this ChapLine solely the town board's responsibility?
Town, yes.
The town, not the town.
I'm not gonna do
Yeah,
it, but-
not you personally. But yes, okay, because, but but really, for me, it's about the resident buy-in, our parent, like community members okay with this, and also security. Like for me, that's the top priority. And I know she said that there was 500,000, but 10 million plus, and I know that plus could be significant now with the inflation of construction and supplies. What percentage are you looking to fund this project?
As much as we can.
Yeah, do you have a goal or some like number in mind or no?
I mean, if we could fund, honestly, I don't wanna limit us. I'd like to fund all of it
Yeah,
if
yeah.
possible, and there are significant opportunities, especially trails to rails, and there are many opportunities. So if
Okay.
we could fund all of it, I would love that. I certainly don't wanna
Right.
put a dollar amount on it.
I would, just to add to that, I would say it would just depend on the individual funding opportunities, because they have a maximum amount you can ask for. So we've been looking at multiple ones, but yeah, our goal is to get the 10 million. There is always a local match as well though. So while the town might get, we'll just say the 10 million, well actually the $500,000, there is a town match of, 50-50 match. So a lot of these funds, there still will be town responsibility, but those, it doesn't have to all be a cash equal match. It can be staff hours or volunteer hours or things like that, which again, depending on what grants are awarded, we'll look at those each one and sort of figure out what makes the most sense for the town.
And what's the anticipated timeline? If like you started tomorrow, what would be?
Oh, I don't know. How long do you think it would take to construct?
Because then now you're gonna have construction vehicles and people like all over, so just thinking.
Well, it would be, I mean, again, with everything, we're gonna work closely with the town and the communities, and everything we phased and phased out, so that the impacts are, at one at a time. It's not, and there's different, and obviously putting in that bridge, we might need access from the northern portion and southern portion. I mean, I think we have to anticipate a year in terms of like mobilization until completion. But that doesn't mean there's always, construction happening. And again, we'll work very closely with the communities, the school, the town, of phasing and understanding. Like if there's, to plan things around the school year, we do that all the time. If that, the impacts we think are gonna be, impact the, what's happening in the school, because there may need to be access to different things, but all that will be orchestrated and part of the whole construction schedule and the construction implementation plan.
So nothing like Sawmill. What's
So
happening
two-
over there?
two sort of interrelated things. How critical is it in terms of getting grant funds? Is it to have a support letter from us? Will that open up other grant possibilities for you? And if so, what's the timeline there? Because we would obviously have to discuss this at a public board meeting. So what are you looking for in terms of when you need to hear from us and how that opens up funding possibilities for you?
So Jill, do you wanna talk to it? I mean, I believe that the letter is pretty critical for us to receive that. Do you wanna talk about timelines?
So we actually have a meeting with the TAP committee to review our application to find out where our shortfalls were.
Okay.
We always knew that there was a hole in our application by not having the Chappaqua Central School District letter of support. We have gotten far-reaching support from T-Town down to, just residents to our elected officials and everyone in between. But certainly when you're talking about connecting two of critical infrastructures, the high school and the middle school, along with the train station, we believe there was a gaping hole. We will find out soon when we review it with them. But we also believe that there probably are some joint opportunities for funding. We know this with other types of grants that we have explored other municipalities when it's a shared services, when there's an IMA, an intermunicipal agreement. I can tell you just with our water treatment plant, we're partners with Pleasantville. The fact that we have a partnership with another municipality and provide water to a minimum of 4 other municipalities besides opens up a whole nother level of funding to us that we would not have if we were just by ourselves.
Right, so
And so,
and the reason though I ask about timing is because as Warren mentioned earlier, that we are going to undertake another safety and security audit of our district buildings, and we would want to make sure that we are covering all our bases in terms of that, because that's our main concern, before we would be able to, you know, feel comfortable sending a letter of support. Like we feel that we would have to undertake some additional
Right, I mean, we would certainly be happy to take and share this iteration with your security team.
Okay.
Lee, would you be able to just shed some light on the distances between the current proposed location of the ChapLine as it runs behind the high school? How far is it from there?
I just want to say something about the letter of support in terms of timing while I go get the sheet that has it. There are new funding opportunities coming up all the time, both federally and state, in terms of, and a lot of them are focused on trails and safe routes to schools and all sorts of things like that. There are a few that we're looking at this fall. I don't know if they fit perfectly with ChapLine and this ChapLine, but again, those were just released like a month ago. So in terms of timing, I would say the sooner the better, because when these opportunities are coming out, to have it, to be able to go after something if it fits within this would be great. And again, there's a grant application due in September, one in October. And again, Jill and I have been talking about it. I'm not sure if the town's gonna go after either of those, but there is possibility. I think when the town speaks with the New York State DOT about the TAP application and why we weren't awarded that, we might get some more insight. But just again, in terms of timing, I would say the sooner the better. But again, if there's need for further conversations or any of the material that I presented here tonight, I can get all that to you. And one other thing I wanted to say about the safety thing is if the town does get the funding with this, we propose some options in terms of fencing or things like that along property lines. It really would be sitting down with the school at that time of what the best solution is and how the school wants to approach it. Because the school might want access onto it, not access back on the school property, to allow the cross-country team to get down there that way, or they again go out the entrance on Roaring Brook and go down. But again, there can be an opportunity. There are gates that are one-way gates and or lock key pads getting back in. Again, all those would be conversations that we would have when we actually do design development beyond this conceptual design that we currently have. I just wanted to speak to a few of the conversations that we were having.
Okay.
And just I'm sorry, if
okay.
if you had a private donor, how do they transfer that money to you? We use the foundation. What is your means to like have someone give a donation to the town? Do you have a
I believe they can just donate money to the town. We just have to accept it by resolution.
We've done that before.
okay. I didn't know if you
Doesn't have
had
to do it like a 501c3
yeah.
that we have to go through.
Do you have something like that?
Not necessary. Under the town law, the town can accept a donation.
Okay.
I have a question about funding, maybe it's a question for Jill or Lee. In terms of the school district itself, are there opportunities for the school district, without taking away funding from the town, but for the school district itself to get funding as a corollary of this project for joining with the town board, I'm wondering. So for instance, for the school district to connect to the trail, or for perhaps new recreational or athletic opportunities. I don't know, I mean, that could be something that would be advantageous to the school district as well, so I'm wondering if you've seen that.
Or augment our safety.
Right, or for safety, yeah.
We haven't explored those yet, but we certainly can.
I just wanna go back to my question, because when and I understand it's different, the town is different, but when you are making a donation to the town, let's say you have a private donor that wants to pay for the whole thing, how do they they can donate it directly to the town and that doesn't impact their taxes? Like, we have a process where they donate to a organization for tax purposes. Is it this, there doesn't have to be like an intermediary donation process for them to be able to?
I can't speak directly to that because I obviously am counseling on the other side. I'm
Right.
getting the money. But the one or two times that we've done it, my understanding is, speaking to my counterpart, was that it was not a problem donating directly to the municipality. There was some
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
information or documentation that they wanted just to verify how the funds were being used. But beyond that, my impression was that it was not an issue.
Yeah, it's
But if
definitely
you
not an
know
issue
a
for you,
private
but in
donor-
terms of,
That's why
in terms of them
Like,
getting a
this is a
deduction,
problem
that's what we're
somewhere.
curious
No,
about.
I just,
The issue for the donor.
I'm just asking this question because
The donor.
we just had a substantial donation and there was a process to transfer that money to the school district, which if that process didn't exist, the organization couldn't have donated the money to us. So there was
There's a
some
restriction on
some
how they had to do it.
requirements. So the reason I was asking because sometimes you're in conversations with people about different projects. So I just wanted to make sure I had the right information if I began to talk about this project.
Yeah, the
That's what I
school
was-
district may just be different than a municipality, which is
There may be rules for certain foundations, for example, they have to, Nature Conservancy might not be able to just make a donation to a municipal town unless it's for a certain purpose, so there may be those rules, but I think if a wealthy person wanted to say, here's $10 million, go do it, and I don't care if I get a tax deduction, then
Right.
and saying it's legal,
We're just wondering what
but whether they get the
how to
full
make it
deductibility
enticing.
of it.
Right, so
How to make it.
in other words, the restrictions would be geared towards the donor, not the donee. So make it easier for someone to transfer, and all of those structures would have to be in place for the person donating, whereas we could accept the money.
we can look into that.
But I can tell you that Town Law 64 authorizes the town board to accept, because we've done it before,
No,
accept
that I
it
know.
directly. So to me, it's an advantage that the town can offer, assuming that the tax deductibility checks out, and I think it would, to deal directly with the town as opposed to an intermediate. It makes it simpler. And I
I
think
agree with that.
I am
It's very simple if you take the third party out, but
switching back gears slightly, and I recognize this is somewhat out of your guys' control and you're working on talking with homeowners and what have you, but looking at this whole proposal, to be honest, the part that's most attractive to me about it is the idea of students being able to safely commute to school both ways, to Greeley and to Bell. And I would say that, and I understand a lot of the concerns, but the weakness in this to me at this juncture is that you've got a huge number of households in the middle of this line where the commute is not ridiculous, right? It's like under a mile for the vast majority of those households in either direction, but there's no access point. Whereas, like, candidly, kids are not walking 2.5 miles from, like, Kitchell or whatever to get it on Roaring Brook or whatever. So it seems that on some level, if this is gonna go forward, it would be a great option for our kids to be able to walk or bike to school. That would be awesome, especially because I see them walking 117 and it's not great. But to not have any access point for the majority of the households for who this would be like a reasonable commute seems sort of like a weakness. And I know it's not completely in your control because there's the community that needs to, but I think that as you're, finalizing these plans and looking at it, I wonder if that's something that could be further explored because it seems like that's the best use of it in a lot of ways.
I know from people who live along the North County Trail that they find it a huge amenity to be able to walk out of their backyards many times right onto the trail. So that may be something that those households decide to utilize. But I think that's gonna happen in time.
okay.
Any other questions?
Well, I was gonna just answer the one question of how close is it to the school property?
Oh, thank you.
And this is the tight space right here, if you can see my cursor.
Yes, you can, thank you.
And so that's about 10 feet away from the trail on this section. And then again, over here, it's probably about 20, 25 feet away. And then this is the school line here, that dashed black, dashed with a smaller dash. Hold on, I don't know where my annotation is. So 10 feet the closest for a little bit of segment, and then about 20 feet over here. And then aside from that, it's like 50 plus feet away.
There's a lot of stuff in between the line.
Yeah, Lee,
Mhm.
where is
I don't know
the
how else, there's
where's
just
the
a lot of
school
stuff in there.
building
There
on
is.
this picture?
Yeah, we're, right.
Where's
just
the high school physically?
All off of, in this white area, you can see that one little area where the edge of the parking where all that fill is dumped down the slope. So the parking lot is right in here, and then the buildings would be over here,
It's
further away. This is a huge, obviously steep slope that exists over there now that we can walk down to get to the trail. So you have a huge topography difference as well. Elevation change is drastic.
I'm not saying anything could happen, but really, in order for kids to get back there that way, we'd have to have like a step, like down the hill.
Get down there.
Yeah, I mean,
Down the hill.
To have
Steps or a switchback
I mean,
trail
it's-
to get down it.
Not saying they couldn't run down the hill, they could do that now, but like, you know, if you, there'd have to be it would take some effort, it would take some real effort.
Nice tumble.
So,
Okay,
okay,
all right.
It's hard.
All right, well, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks, Lee.
okay, so, do you want me to start? We wanted to talk about the sign in front of Bell.
Sure.
Okay, so we had, I received some feedback from the community about the way that we were using the sign. So I had reached out to Jill, and then Hillary and I had met with Jill and Lisa, and we felt the best place to talk about that would be here. The feedback started coming in, and I know some other board members have also gotten feedback around the birthdays. So we looked at the agreement, and in the agreement, it has language that we felt that those posts were outside of what our original agreement was. Specifically, the acceptable message language, the prohibited message language, and then the purpose of the sign to display important messages to the community. And so we kind of did we tried to get a pathway just to this point till we could have this conversation. But we thought it would be important for us to discuss it together because the agreement comes to a conclusion in December. And so this would be a good time to talk about, you know, what's working with the sign, what's not working with the sign, and whether or not we would continue in an agreement with the town around the sign. So we thought that this would be a good place to have that conversation. So we invited Margot to be here as a part of it because has to do with this language that was crafted before many of us were at the table. So Jane, did you want to add?
And Jill, do you wanna sit up here also? Or, okay.
Thanks, though.
Yeah, we had concerns on behalf of the district too, just about, you know, the access and equity aspect, and there were some comments to board members about some people feeling uncomfortable about the birthday messages, and you know, if they're, you know, some kids going to school and saying my birthday's up on the sign and other kids are not on the sign, and so we took a look at this to say, well, we just wanted to make sure what the intended use of this was, and the way that we read it, and he had spoken with Margot about it, was very much for community use and important messages regarding community groups, organizations, town organizations, et cetera, as opposed to individual things like that weren't necessarily tied to the school or to the town. So that's why we had Margot take a look at the agreement to see what makes sense so that we were all comfortable with the joint sign usage moving forward.
So before we move to that, so the original intent of doing this was really to bring a sense of community back to town. We were so divided after elections and with other things going on in town that the concept behind it was to bring a sense of community back to town and allow people to contact the town board and want to advertise one of these special events, a birthday, an anniversary, etc. I have received only positive feedback on this. You know, in terms of equity, anyone is entitled to do this. We don't discriminate. The only time we have ever said no was when one person wanted to wish their mother a happy Mother's Day, and we said, well, everyone wants to wish their mother happy Mother's Day, so we just said happy Mother's Day in general. But in terms of birthdays, there's no discrimination. Anyone was entitled to do that. We did hear your concern potentially with looking at ethnicity of last names. So we did get rid of last names for any child, so it's just an initial. So it would be like Ryan K, happy birthday. We did get rid of that at your request. And also we made sure that any birthdays up there for more than one day, so that there's no way you can actually pinpoint the exact date of the birthday. So we did put that up to do that as well as an accommodation to, recognize some of the concerns that I know were communicated to us. But, I would certainly, we want to collaborate well with the school board, but this is something I even just saw, got a note yesterday with pictures, thank you for making our day so special. Especially, during the pandemic, there were a lot of times where parents emailed and said, my child couldn't have a birthday party and this really made their day, special, or we couldn't afford a birthday party, whatever it was, but we were able to come and see their name in lights, and it really made them feel special. So the intent was to bring a sense of community back to our town. So if there's a way that we can collaborate to make sure that works, I think that's something important to ensure that we foster. Now legally, we had our attorneys look at it as well. We didn't think that there was an issue with that. But certainly, reasonable minds can differ, so it is a good time to discuss.
Well, we're living in a strange age these days. There are things going on in the world, and we also have a concern about security of students and the signs being on school property and somebody trying to get into the school to wish somebody a happy birthday when, they don't even know who they are. So, we always think about the security of the kids first. Without a last name, it's a little bit better.
You think people are gonna try to
One-
break into the school to wish
one
someone a
never
happy
knows what-
birthday?
You never.
At that one
It's-
school when there are
it's-
many throughout
Well,
town.
it's just an example of something that a person might use. You see what's been happening in the world. We wanna make sure that our kids are as safe and secure as possible.
Absolutely.
I just don't know what the limits of the sign would be. If we have a document that outlines accepted and prohibited uses, if something's not clearly listed in there, is anything an important message? And at what point can we determine what can and cannot go up there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the intention, at least as we looked at it, was community events. Events that are, whether it's community day, whether it's a town event, whether your parking pass is due, whether there's a sporting event. And when we look at the usage form or the request form, and it states specifically on there that you should list the address of the organization. So for us, the concern is not specifically about a birthday, but it's individuals having some control over the content of that sign, when our opinion was that all of these messages were always something of important community interest, not of someone's personal interest. So that's why we are concerned with when you take this out, what will happen to that, whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, or something else some individual wants to put on that sign, when I think the intention of this agreement was to do important messages for both the town and the community via organizations, organizational usage. And that is our reading of what this agreement was intended to provide. And so we have to decide how we do that in the future. We want to be able to agree on the content and what goes up there. Right now, we don't agree on what is appropriate content, and we're reading it one way, and I know that you're reading it another way. And so we're trying to figure out what we would do moving forward then, as this agreement is about to terminate, because the sign is on our school property.
Yes. Well, to me, I just have two areas of focus right now. There's clearly what is in the contract, which determines what we're entitled to do. So that's in black and white. perhaps subject to interpretation, but nevertheless, it's written in the contract. But secondly, you mentioned equity, and Lisa answered that everyone has the chance to do this, to call in, but I'm just curious what you had in mind when you said that, because that you didn't exactly flesh that out, so I
It's just
like
that
to understand that a
some
little
children's
better.
parents will go to the effort and know that it's there, and some families may not. So it can create
I think
some
the other
upset.
part of this is that the vast majority of people don't understand that this is a joint sign. And I think some people think it's solely a school district sign. I'm sure some people think it's only a town sign. Like, I don't think it's, but I think that some of the feedback we got was, why is the school district only wishing some kids a happy
Right.
birthday? And so that's part of the problem. It's not necessarily just, happy birthday, Johnny. It's that parents driving by perceive that Belle is wishing Johnny a happy birthday and not their kid. And I think, even people who are sort of at least paying attention have said to me, how can the school district do that and only recognize some kids? So, and you can't make people know who's
What the
controlling
agreement
what or what
is,
have you, but I
right.
think given that it's on Bell property, it's not an unfounded assumption, even if it's incorrect, that Bell is putting out the same way that, that enough people in this town don't know that the school district's different from the PTA is different from the town board. Like, there's a lot of just, oh, you people are in charge, like, you're clearly responsible for this. And so I think that that's part of what's going on here, is the perception among some parents and community members that the school district was prioritizing some children's birthdays over others, not understanding that we weren't the ones.
And I'd also just like to add, we discussed the town putting a sign on their, it's a town display versus the school district's display, but then at the end of the day, you have one kid walking to school and it's their birthday and their name's not on it. And I just don't want anyone walking into school feeling bad about that. And in school, when we do this, we announce everybody. There's no parent, because we can, and we do. So I don't, and it can't be isolated to like the birthday issue, because it's really broader than that, because then I don't understand the scope of the agreement at all if we don't define it in a way that we both are operating within the same context, which I thought we were doing until this moment, because we haven't had any problems up until now that we can't seem to resolve. And there is a mechanism to resolve it. We could have a third party do it, or we can simply not renew the agreement because we're at that point in time, because it expires in December. But I don't know how to move forward being comfortable with birthdays in any form, whether they're adults in the community, because they're on there. There's someone on there right now with their first and last name, happy birthday, or kids on a sign that's joint, that's right now
Looks like we're
jointly
endorsing
jointly owned by the school district. So that's I don't know how to resolve this in a way that everyone's gonna feel good about it.
I mean,
That
I
makes
feel
sense.
like, with all due respect, there's a third option, which is not litigation or threatening not to renew a contract, but it's actually collaborating and coming together as a community and figuring out how we can best do this in a way that makes everyone comfortable. And I think that's where we should be trying to find this, not threatening litigation.
That's why we're here. I'm not threatening, I'm just stating. So I don't know what the resolution is, because right now it's not working for us.
Okay, so can I say something?
But go ahead, Kelly. I
Okay,
just
so
wanna respond to that.
I'll just, so when we talked about equity, so there are parents who are always gonna be the ones that are able to call in, write in, and get their kid's name on something, celebrate them, and whatnot. But there's a whole there's a whole other group of parents who either don't want to do that, not because they don't want to celebrate their child, but for whatever their reasons are, that which we don't know. And I think when you first talked about intent, like, to me, and when this first came up, I was sort of like, okay, birthday, sounds good. Wishing somebody a happy birthday is a great thing. But there's something about it, because it is children, and because we're the school board, and because it's on one of our school properties and not on all of our school properties, and it's available to all, but not all children are going to get that highlight. And I think it's just tricky. I'm not saying it's, we're right, you're wrong. It's not even about that. And without getting into all this, like I just want us to talk, like, you're saying, the intent is to bring the community together. So then can we just not do the birthdays and do something else to bring the community, like, or maybe do the birthdays somewhere else where it's not on school property sign, like, so that we don't have this, even though you might have said in your supervisor's report or wherever, please write in to celebrate, announce, and then take the last name out, not last name out. Instead of going through that, why don't we just use the sign for, town events, school events, so that it's not just about an individual, and that's it, and then do the birthday thing if we want to continue that, because again, some people might like it, some people might not like it. It's always going to be a little bit of a mix. You got all the I love it, photos, and
Right,
then unfortunately we got all the
stuff.
What about my kid? Why, I didn't know, I don't know, so I think I don't wanna get into like who's right, who's wrong, we're not threatening anything. I think it's just, it's uncomfortable, to a lot of people, it's a little bit, I don't wanna say uncomfortable either. It's like, children notice it too. So they're like, well, why didn't you call it? And, I don't know, I'm sorry. But it's,
I was
and
busy
then,
working that
so
day.
right, it just becomes tricky for something with the intent was something else, to do something good for the community. And I think it might not be necessary because we can do all of that through something else, right? You know what I mean? And then like, you might have Seven Bridges kids going, where's our sign? Celebrating our birthdays. But these are things that you're not getting, but we will get.
But it's not just Bell kids, it's anyone, and just so you
No,
know.
of course,
and
of
most
course,
people,
of course.
honestly, I've met said they assume that's a town sign. Even though it may be on Bell property, it's outside of the fence, it doesn't say Bell on it, everyone assumes it's a town sign, at least everyone I've spoken to.
Right, everyone who's calling us.
Right,
because
right.
They're calling you,
Of
end of the
course
day
they're
is
gonna
the
think,
problem.
right?
I'm just curious, so town council said there's a safety concern, someone might come on.
Not town council.
I mean, school board council, someone might come on school property. I think Jane said there's an equity concern. Hillary said it's like, well, how did you pick one versus the other, and we're hearing that, and Keely sort of said a lot of the same things. So, I mean, and Christine said it's a free-for-all. If we don't draw some lines, then how do we know? So if that's the answer, then we just have to basically say nothing, no anniversaries, no birthdays, nothing. We can't do the sort of nice community thing because it's not, in your opinion, in the four corners of this document, and short of some mediator or, I wouldn't say litigation, but scrapping this contract in December, that's the answer.
Just
And
one
just let me
second,
finish
I
the
will let
thought.
you finish, but our council does not believe it's
Yeah,
prohibited
I
by
just
the
said school board council.
So
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, quantify the extent to which this is a big issue, because it's astonishing to me that you haven't heard one similar complaint in that regard. And then I guess the counter to that, the answer is anyone can do it. If someone says, why is my kid's name on there, you can call up and do it.
Some of our families don't have English as a first language.
No, I understand that, Jane, and I get that, and so that's a consideration, but it's a consideration. And if that were always the only consideration, then we would effectively just sort of flatten everything, right? And to me, I don't think that's the right answer. So that's what I'm wrestling with, is to say like, this is sort of a blunt instrument to solve a problem that we can probably try to alleviate in other ways, but that's just my
If you look at like, I guess, number 8 on page 10, it says acceptable message content, school-sponsored events, town-sponsored events, not-for-profit events, traffic, police advisory, community advisories, events that are posted on public triangles, banners, we don't put, signs about kids' birthdays on this, right?
Ed, do you
This is one of those
weigh in on this
And
at
that's
all?
Christine's point, which is to say it's not in here, so let's scrap it.
I'm just
In which
saying.
case, no, in which case, let's say
Right.
that, and then have that discussion.
Exactly.
But all the other things are sort of like, I'm not
That's
really
what I'm
sure
going.
which one is the answer. But Ed, you have a thought.
Well, my 2 cents, this is one of those situations where everyone around the table has the very best intentions, but different opinions. And the solution I would suggest is not gonna be in the language of the agreement, because it was written very broadly. There are no bright lines in that paragraph 8. So, again, the solution, I think, is gonna have to be something that folks sitting at that table come up with. Maybe the solution is there's no solution and that is a termination. Or maybe you can come up with something. But the lawyers, I don't think, are gonna have an answer because this was deliberately written in a way that there weren't bright lines 5 years ago.
No,
So
and
I just
go
wanna
ahead.
say, yeah, I kind of feel, I don't know what the analogy would be, I kind of feel like the child whose 2 parents are fighting. You know, I've spent a lot of time on the school board and I'm on the town board and I just and in my naive way want everyone to be happy and agree. I think that, Lisa had a really wonderful idea of bringing the town together. And for some people it really has. On the other hand, on the school board side, I understand the perspective, and it's a perspective that unless you've been on a school board, you might not get immediately. Because from a school perspective, you think about the children. You don't think about the parents necessarily. So even though the parents can all do this, they won't. And from a school district perspective, you don't think, well, that's tough luck then, because you always think about the impact on the kids. That's all that matters. And those kids are experiencing this in different ways. So now I'm wondering if the intent of making, the feel-good intent is not actually happening. We're hearing the good side of it because people are happy, and the people who are unhappy aren't happy because of their kids, so they're not going to call the town because they don't perceive the town to be responsible for the kids. So they'll call the school. So, I don't have a solution right now. I think we can come up with something that makes everyone happy. We'll have to really put our heads together and think through and, someone said everyone has good intentions, but I'm just putting the 2 perspectives side by side to show how different they are because, again, the schools only think about the impact on the kids. And maybe we could all think about that and come up with a solution based only on how the kids are perceiving this. Because the adults can take care of themselves, And I don't think we have a lot of adult birthdays that come up.
We have a
some.
number of them.
We have some.
Well, but to piggyback on what Vicky's saying, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think part of this really does come down to perception, and maybe that's a way to think about fixing it, is like how to make it clear, it's when it's your parking permit is due, right? Like, obviously that's a town thing, right? Because we don't have parking permits. Or if it's register for fall sports, like,
That's the school thing.
that's a school thing, right? Like, so there are things that are clear. And then I think the problem with this at bottom, and this is an example of other things that could come up, is it's not clear, right? And that's part of the challenge with the shared sign. And so maybe part of what we need to think about, and I don't expect to have an answer, in the next 10 minutes, is how to have clarity around what's on the sign, and so that if there are messages from the town, and maybe it applies to everything as benign as parking permits, this is a message from your town board, or this is a message from your school, like, and I don't have a good answer on how to do that in a way that works on a 10x4 sign or whatever it is, but maybe that's a way to think about this, is bringing some clarity to the messaging.
And the thing is, we can't figure this out today, and I understand,
No.
I absolutely understand the sense of community, and I know that the intentions were nothing but the best, but when we changed the sign, and it was changed shortly before we came in, I was on the board and Christine was here, and there was an agreement, I think, in earlier 2017. And it was to change the sign, but to continue the usage of it. And what I think happened is we were fine, but we didn't have, it's not written in here specifically, it was left broad, but the protocol for the sign usage changed out of good intentions, but it caused some adverse effects for us. So that's the thing, that was a change because there never were those kind of announcements before on the sign. So this is the first time that
Was there a sign there?
there were signs there,
sign
yeah.
there,
So
yeah.
there were, that was not, There never was that, this was
Oh,
a
right,
new protocol or a new allowance that had never been there before. And we had some adverse feedback from it. So that's why we're trying to work through that now. And it's not gonna be in there, we left it broad, and this is the first time there's kind of been a change in the tenor of the usage, so we just have to try and figure it out. And we might be able to figure it out, we're not sure, we're gonna have to continue talking about it, we're probably not gonna do that tonight since we're supposed to be having
We were supposed to have started our meeting 5 minutes
I
long.
appreciate hearing this. If you could forward, it would be helpful, the number of, I don't know if you wanna forward the actual correspondence, if you can do that, but if you can forward the number of
That's a stop in the street type of thing too.
If you can,
Yes.
Listen, I wanna get to yes, I don't know how to get to yes. Like, I don't know how to get to yes with a student walking into Bell not seeing their name on the sign and feeling bad about it because their parent didn't put them on it. And I don't know how to get to yes about building parameters around it so it doesn't become any kind of message that an individual wants to have placed up there who lives in this community about something happening in their home. So I'll continue to think about it. I think it would be good to have thought partners, but I've been thinking a lot about this and I can't figure out a way to get to yes on it. And it sounds almost like I don't even like what I'm saying because I know I've seen pictures of kids outside that sign with their birthday happy. Like I don't even like what I'm sharing, but I feel like what I'm sharing is right for the kids who are feeling a certain way because their parents didn't access this opportunity for them. So we can think about it more and we can talk about it more, but I can't figure out language or a way to get to yes where I don't have students feeling bad about something that didn't happen on their birthday.
And we might feel
And
differently if that
that's
sign were
really
not
where
on
I
our
am.
property, so it's a different thing.
So we can all think about it and talk about it more, but I'm just really struggling with it. I just wanna put that in the middle of the table because I understand what you're doing and I don't wanna be that person that doesn't have families be able to experience joy in that way on a child's birthday, but I'm just thinking about the other side of it for the child who doesn't get to experience that. That's not within their control. So that's really,
no, but it
What do
is
I-
within their parents' control.
All right, I don't.
But I understand what you're saying, and I fully believe that there's always a way to get to yes. We just have to figure out how to get there, and I think we can work together and see if there's a way that we can get there.
so
But you're right, we're not
maybe
gonna do
Jamie
that
can
today.
reach out to Lisa, we can figure out.
All right, we'll try and
Yeah.
we'll have to discuss further
Yeah,
at
maybe
a
we
later
get a
date.
subgroup together and brainstorm it.
It's the town and the school district having to decide what display important messages to the public means.
Okay.
All right, thank you for
For
having us.
another day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, we're so
Really
happy you were able to
Thank you
come.
for coming here.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Cool in here.
Coming down
Paris,
here.
like,
Really?
That's right.
When will you go
Karen,
back?
can we take a,
The academic
are we on break?
I guess the pandemic is still.
I don't know, we'll try, we talked about